And time for another edition of Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants. We are joined by, you could argue, the oldest F of all the Tim Graham Fs when it comes to the podcast world. It is Tyler Dunne, who has begun a new venture, and we're going to talk to him about that. But Tyler Dunne of the Done with Graham podcast, which was my first podcast venture. I don't think it was Tyler's, though. He had done it at a previous stop. But this whole thing got started with Tyler Dunne and me. So Tyler's joining us. Who knows what we'll talk about. We may talk about Doug Marrone and airplane hangers. We may talk about, scoring touchdowns against Salamanca, whatever. Salamanca, is that see, here's my Western New York ignorance. Did you play Salamanca in your league?
We did not, even though I technically lived in Salamanca, went to school at Ellicottville. We would have killed them. We had a much better football team, but they were a class above us. Some would say they were scared, Tim. I think Salamanca was scared of those Eagles from Ellicottville. The year after I graduated, they did play Ellicottville, and I was pretty pissed about it.
All right. Well, let's not get sidetracked. We have more important things to talk about. The Bills are 8-3. UB is undefeated, and Jaret Patterson just ran for 8 touchdowns in a game, over 400 yards. And we have the whole crew here today. Of course, Jonah Bronstein of Bronstein Consolidated is here, and Matthew Fairburn, also of The Athletic. And we're here to talk some foosball. And Tyler, the floor is yours. What comes to mind after this loaded weekend of Western New York football, number one, but also through your venture, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. But give me some thoughts off the top of your head here as we get started.
Sure, yeah, I'm kind of mad that I didn't watch that UB game. That was the one to watch. I didn't watch 1 second of it, so shame on me. I can't wait to learn more about it from you guys. But yeah, Start and Go Long. It's a newsletter within Substack community, but you can go on golongtd.com, subscribe if you want. And I've just been kind of cranking out a variety of stories, features, profiles, and this was the first weekend, I guess, that I kind of took on a way to cover games. I want this to be like an enterprising journalism website, not necessarily, news, and not necessarily game summaries or reaction pieces. So it was a little different, going into it, just in terms of my own little world at Go Long. I was just trying to think of an angle around Mahomes, Brady. Obviously, I figured everybody would be watching that game. The best ever versus the guy who will be the best ever soon if he isn't already. And I had a lot of contacts doing Patrick Mahomes stuff in the past. So I just called up Nick Shimonek. He was his backup at Texas Tech. And I think he knows Patrick Mahomes better than anybody. They're really close friends. He was actually at the animal hospital when we talked. He's got 2 Italian Mastiffs, and they beat the hell out of one of his puppies. So the puppy is good, in a cast, doing well. I just thought he had a great perspective on how Mahomes got to this point as fast as he did. He was kind of, lazy is a strong word, but he kind of admitted he didn't really work that hard at Tech. Cliff Kingsbury kind of zapped that into him because he works as hard as any coach you'll ever hear about. And he watched film of Tom Brady all the time. So talking to him Saturday night, I was able to kind of marry that with what we saw on Sunday. A lot of the things Patrick Mahomes did on the field was really related to what Shimonek said, and it's specifically what he'd look for in Brady. So kind of different, than how we maybe covered games in the past. I think I was up until like 3 a.m. putting this together because I've got one editor who's a buddy of mine who shall remain nameless because he does have a full-time job and he's kind of doing this on the side. But yeah, it's, putting this together and piecing, all the content management behind it. It's a lot of fun.
I happen to know this editor, Tyler.
You would. He may or may not have been at the bachelor party at Scott Hollow down in the Southern Tier.
Interesting.
Tim doesn't remember any of that.
What's that?
Go ahead, Jonah. I think we talked over you.
I said Tim doesn't remember anything from that weekend, so that wouldn't be a good reference point.
Oh, I do. I remember plenty. I remember people sleeping at the bonfire. Well, what technically wasn't a bonfire. It was the setup there at Holiday Valley, you know, the fire pit. There was good times to be had. Interesting photos of Mike Rodak. No, good times. Good times were had by some.
I haven't had a shot since. That's a true story. So we gave those up.
Hey, so Tyler, I guess we're winging it here a little bit because I know that when the four of us get together, there's no telling where we're going to go with it. But go along with Tyler Dunne, the website. So it's in its infancy, really. You had your launch feature last week, and then this was your first Sunday. Like you just said, you're up till 3 a.m. And the template that you posted on your website of what your average week is going to look like seemed pretty full to me. And so people who do subscribe to Go Along with Tyler Dunne, of which I'm a subscriber, jumped on as quickly as I could. And it just seems like there's going to be a lot of content. And so take me through your first Sunday of NFL games and how you wanted to cover it, because I'm sure as much as you planned it out, this is your first Sunday and people are looking at Go Along with Tyler Dunne. You were on the Dan Patrick show the other day. You've been making the media round. So, you know, a lot of people are looking and they're expecting. So what was it like for you having some pressure on your first Sunday?
Yeah, you know, and I wasn't really sure how to approach game coverage with this all, because you're right. I want this to be a long form newsletter, and you know, that those kind of stories you don't just kind of churn out every day. But I also want this to be worth people's time, be worth people's money, and I want to keep Go Along kind of humming along through the season. So thankfully I have, you know, a lot of reporting done on a lot of the features and profiles that people will see over the coming weeks. So like, you know, Tim, I mean, you're the best feature writer in the country. I'm not just blowing smoke, but you plan ahead, you work ahead, you do these conversations in advance, and that helps. So in terms of time management, I'm not that worried. I just want this to be worth people's time. And I want to try to give people a story that they haven't read before that matters, kind of beyond the muck that we get on social media. That's a whole other story. To answer your question, yeah, I think Peter King kind of sets the standard, you know, in terms of nationally covering the NFL out of Sunday. I mean, nobody's going to be able to touch what he does. The MMQB turned Football Morning in America is required reading for anybody with a pulse that enjoys football. It's unbelievable. So I guess, you know, in a way you could say it's kind of a poor man's or a homeless man's PK, but I think I can offer a different perspective. I think I've got a lot of relationships and a lot of folks in the Rolodex that can tap into for different storylines as they come up, because I want to be flexible. I want to think ahead. And just with this weekend, I guess it was pretty straightforward, right? I mean, Patrick Mahomes is playing Tom Brady. We've read so much about Patrick Mahomes. We've read so much about Tom Brady. And I just was hoping to find somebody who might be able to offer something a little different. So maybe that was a little different for people. And then out of that, just kind of whipping around the league with analysis, with a little bit of reporting, and go from there. But yeah, definitely, I think the foundation for Go Along is going to be, you know, number one, Fridays, when I will hopefully be dropping a story that will make people want to drop everything, what they're doing, and read it right then. So I think it's important to kind of build that cadence, Tim, and just get people thinking mentally, okay, it's Wednesday, I can expect this. It's Thursday, I can expect this. It's Friday, I can expect this. And this is just the beginning. I know it seems like a lot, but I'm hoping that this can keep growing over time too.
Hi, what's it? You know, it's funny. I see what you're doing now, and I think back to when you covered the Bills, just a season, but when you were a massive pain in the ass to be competing against, because it seemed
You
like
say that, Matt, you're right. It was just a season, wasn't it?
it felt like 5 years with
Yes,
everything
it
he
did.
churned
It
out.
did. And not in a bad way, but yeah,
No,
Tyler
yeah,
was that
with-
prolific.
That's what I mean.
I
And
appreciate it.
you know, the cadence, you know, and what Tim's talking about, when you look at it on paper and what you're telling people that you're going to bring, it's like, wow, that's a lot. But when I think back to 2015, I'm like, I don't know. It seems like Ty's lightening his load a little bit here. But you know, how do you?
Work ethic was never an issue with Tyler.
Oh,
No,
God.
nor
Knock it
nor
off.
was cranking stuff out. But what's it been like for you? Because I know the cadence wasn't that way at Bleacher Report. So have you kind of been knocking off the cobwebs, getting your engine revving back to that speed you were at before?
You're speaking to my soul, Matt. I mean, it definitely is a shock to the system both ways. I mean, because even before the Buffalo News, working with Bob McGinn, Tom Silverstein, Lori Nickel, the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, I mean, that was the cadence. It was just multiple posts, stories, podcasts, videos every day. I mean, the Packer fans, hey, I was one of them growing up. They're insane. They're nuts. They become your boss. I mean, you're just kind of like feeding the beast. So to go from that, bring it to Buffalo, and then Bleacher Report, which I'm unbelievably grateful for these last 4 years. They didn't want that cadence. I mean, their model, they were able. I mean, it's changed over the years, but they were able to aggregate, pick up stuff from other people, and they just wanted me to stick to 1 or 2 stories a month, long form, report the hell out of them. And honestly, I felt like I could always do more. It just wasn't required. It wasn't needed. So that was a shock to the system. Granted, the timing was pretty good. I met my wife and we have a 1-year-old and we got a house. A lot of stuff happened in our world here. And so now that's the challenge now to be a dad and a husband and a homeowner and kind of go back to cranking that stuff out. But no.
If only I had all those distractions back when I was competing against you, would have made my life a lot easier.
No, they're amazing. They're Gina well. She's unbelievably understanding with this all. So no, it's great. I mean, I'm only 1 week into it, but I really have no worries, no concerns about churning this out. I think as long as I think long enough in advance and plan things out, because the last thing I absolutely want to do is cut corners and have a story that's a little light on the reporting, or maybe I didn't ask a question here or a question there. I want that to be like the bedrock of it is Friday, that thing you can expect every single week, but just know that newsletter is going to keep pumping out, no doubt.
Tyler, I'd imagine you researched this a little bit before diving in, but what do you think, or what have you learned about Substack, Patreon, these independent journalism? I wanted to say shops, but it's not a shop, kind of doing it on your own. What do you think about this field, and what does that bring to you and your work and readers, and where is this going with these kind of things?
I mean, obviously Tim and Matt, you guys know it well at The Athletic. I think we're all going to be biased just in terms of like the model, right? That direct, consumer to you, paying for your content, believing in you, no advertising, no corporate overlords, none of that stuff that media companies have had in the past is really appealing. So I think that for the future of journalism, I mean, I think this is the future. I mean, who knows? I mean, advertising is pretty volatile, and it'll go up, it'll go down. In terms of Substack itself, I didn't even know what Substack was when Bleacher Report laid us off back in August. Had no clue. A bunch of people reached out to me and said, "Hey, have you heard about Substack? Like, you'd be perfect for this. Like, your kind of writing, it's just different, it's unique, and if you just put your stuff out there, see what happens." And I talked to a lot of people. I talked to Steve Hayes. He's part of the Dispatch. That's probably Substack's biggest company. They came from different magazines and different places. Him and Jonah Goldberg, I believe, headed up. And he couldn't say enough about Substack and the direction of things and how good of a company it is. Talked to Henry Abbott at True Hoop. Unbelievably successful NBA writer, editor. Obviously, folks probably remember from ESPN. He loved it. And I just think it's really clean. It's really user-friendly. And it reaches you directly. I mean, it goes, I guess what's different about it from The Athletic or any other pay sites, it just goes directly to your email. Which you guys do that though now with your newsletters. So maybe I shouldn't speak out of turn. You guys do that as well.
Newsletters are the future, we keep being told.
Yeah, exactly. I think it is. We can all have sites and URLs and apps, but people are refreshing their email, incessantly. That's where people live. So I really love that concept of it. And yeah, I mean, it's entrepreneurial. I'm not going to lie. Like, I love that aspect of it. I mean, it's kind of in my blood. I mean, my dad had his own company. My sister just started her own company, a gym down in Great Valley. And although we'll see what happens with all these rules, conversation for another day, but I think that urge has always kind of been like inside of me somewhere. And I always wondered, like, I love writing about sports. I love just, storytelling and talking to all these people. But I would love to just be my own boss one day. So Substack gives you that opportunity. They take 10% and it's easy as hell to use. I've been loving it so far.
What kind of market research did you do? And you're talking about getting into and researching the site and all those things. But what did you do in terms of formulating this template that we talked about earlier and deciding what the reader is going to want? How much work you need to produce on a weekly basis, the type of work, what they're looking for, price point, all these other things that you had to think about that you never have to before. You just researched a story and wrote it. Now you have so many things to worry about. Whether or not to go for advertising. And maybe that's another layer to this question I'm asking you. But yeah, what went into before you launched, what went into your preparations?
Yeah, there's definitely some, pissing in the wind, as I like to say. There's going to be a lot of trial and error. Not going to act like I'm the expert here, because I sure as heck am not. Probably should do some more market research, actually. I think this is just so new, at least to me, that the concept of a newsletter is very, very new. I've subscribed to some myself, and I think I'm a lot of my market research is how I'm consuming these newsletters myself. I think putting something out first thing in the morning is huge. Creating a habit is huge. That's what Henry Abbott really stressed to me is you want to create that habit. That's almost more valuable than any price you could ever set. Anything financially you could ever do. Is think about our day-to-day lives. When you get up in the morning, you might change a diaper, you maybe put the coffee on, you maybe flip the TV on. Do you go right to a certain website? Do you read somebody's article? Is there, we're such creatures of habit. Somehow changing those habits, I think, is paramount. How do I do that? I don't really know. I guess I'm kind of simple that way. I feel like if I am able to put out just good stuff and stories people enjoy that are going to be different, that it can kind of knife through a lot of the muck out there. And there's a lot of it. I mean, you guys are incredible. I read everything you guys write. There's a lot of amazing writers at The Athletic and beyond. SI still has a good core. There's some at ESPN, but I mean, I'm going to tell you guys, I feel like most folks, our generation, it's just like you're flipping through Twitter, you're spitting out memes and GIFs and takes. And that's kind of a lot of people's lives and jobs and how they consume stuff today, sadly. So to me, my market research was just that. I feel like there's a niche for people who don't want to live in that world and do want to take their brains back, as Hamish, the founder of Substack, likes to say. Let people take their brains back. You pay somebody, you want to read what this person says. You think they offer a perspective or reporting or something that's different. And you're willing to spend, 25 minutes reading that story as opposed to 25 minutes, farting around on Twitter. So I think that I'm hoping that kind of snaps back in 2020 and beyond. And folks do want to kind of read more and consume, longer form kind of stories and content. And that becomes a habit, because that's, to me, that would be my market research. Not that I really did any on a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. It's more like, shooting from the hip, kind of a instinctual market research, Tim.
Right. And that's the Warren Buffett model. Maybe not shooting from the hip, but I think the spirit of it is pursuing what you like or what you would want and trusting your discerning abilities of, hey, I really like Coca-Cola, therefore I'm going to buy Coca-Cola. I love Dairy Queen, therefore I'm going to buy Dairy Queen. So here it is. You love long form journalism. You're betting on yourself, which, I think we've all had to do. Everybody on this call has had to do at some point. You've done it previously in your career, but now this is the ultimate betting on yourself, really. And, it's an admirable venture, and I'm really looking forward to seeing where it goes. And you said earlier that you threw a bouquet at my feet that I didn't respond to. But for us to enjoy a full circle jerk, let me say that your abilities as a feature writer are unsurpassed. So it's good to see you back in the game. That's for sure.
Oh, appreciate that, man. I really do. Well, I learned from the best. So.
What is it that you look forward to doing without tipping your hand? I know you don't like to let people know what you're working on, but can you give vague, ideas to what's coming? Because I think, and plus too, I'm guessing this is an assumption. You're going to want to spread out within the league. You began with a Buffalo Bills story, and I think you have so much of your audience, is from Western New York because it's where you're from. You worked at the Buffalo News, you covered the Bills, but I'm sure you strive for a national presence. So moving around the league with your coverage, I'm sure is going to be significant.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, parachuting into different markets. And I think the cool thing about Substack too, I can kind of see where the free email signups are coming from, where the subscriptions are coming from, and how certain stories resonate. And I should have said this at the top, but folks, I mean, obviously subscribe anytime you'd like. So for the first few weeks, you can just put your email in and sign up on the free email list and get the story. So you kind of get a sense for, what to expect long-term. I should probably be less paranoid about my ideas. As you guys know, I don't like really talking about that all, but you got to sell this stuff, right? People got to know what to expect. So I know I'm very, very paranoid. It's the Bob McGinn in me. Bob wouldn't tell me what he was working on all the time. So I blame my Green Bay father, Bob, for that. This week though, speaking of Bob McGinn and Green Bay, I will have a Packers story on Friday. So we'll be going back to that have some.
They love you out there after your last story.
Oh, big fans. But no, it will be a little more upbeat.
Let's stop there.
It will be more upbeat.
We don't have to say Packers in general, but, and I guess this is kind of part of the market research question, but a little bit more inside baseball. How much did you reach out to teams to say, what kind of access will go along with Tyler Dunne get that because I'm not at Bleacher Report or at the Buffalo News or working for I'm not the beat writer anymore and I'm unaffiliated with a specific outlet. I mean, did you reach out to different PR staffs and say, hey, am I going to be able to get so-and-so on the phone? Am I going to be able to get players? What kind of response did you get?
The response has been, I mean, I'm not just BSing you guys. It's been overwhelmingly positive. Part of me wondered, like, all these players, all of these marketing agencies and agents and teams, a lot of them were very accommodating. Was it just because, Bleacher Report had such a huge platform and reaches a lot of people? I've had unbelievably good success getting high profile players without giving who away. I mean, I talked to a handful of just, quote unquote stars that were willing to go deep on some subjects and were willing to talk to me at length. And just because they, I might've talked to them in the past and there was a relationship there, or, some of these guys I never even talked to before in my life. I think maybe part of it, I think it's been a weird year with COVID, a lot of Zooms and a lot of press conferences, and it's probably got to drive you guys nuts. You can't talk to these players in person in a locker room. I think a lot of players are dying to talk. I think a lot of players are dying to just tell their stories or go beyond what they have been this year. And my hope is that we kind of snap back into open locker room once COVID kind of goes away. I hope this doesn't become the norm for the NFL, which we're probably going to have to fight for. But no, I mean, it's been great. PR departments have been really good. I've got some better relationships with some better than other in terms of all of that. With the Packers story, I was able to just reach players directly. Have a couple sources where I can get folks' cell phone numbers, and for the most part, they answer, they talk. It was great, and hopefully it'll be a story that's a little different. I guess to tease it a little bit, I think what I find interesting about Green Bay is they're kind of building. They kind of had two teams within one, you don't really see this kind of team building in the NFL where, I mean, they're developing a quarterback, developing a running back. They have all these young pieces underneath a layer or two of Aaron Rodgers playing like an MVP, Devontae Adams, Aaron Jones. And I mean, Aaron Rodgers himself was very, very upset that they drafted his replacement. All the fans were upset about it. Why aren't you trying to win now? I think they're finding a way to win now and in the future. And it's kind of a model that maybe more teams should emulate.
Having the Bears and the Lions in your division is helpful.
That doesn't hurt. That doesn't hurt. And the Vikings. So, yeah.
I was going historically, but yeah, the Vikings this, for last couple of years, that's for sure.
Yeah.
That'll really help keep a quarterback feeling pretty elite.
Yeah.
Looking elite.
It does. But you know what? They did beat up the Saints on the road. I know it was early in the year, but I feel like the Packers, covering them out there, they were always pretty soft by January. A lot of that had to do with Mike McCarthy and the way he ran practices, the way he ran the team. Ted Thompson, the way he drafted players. I mean, they definitely gravitated toward the choir boy and not the asshole, if we can say that. You got to have a few assholes, right? I mean, you got to have some gnarly players. So they've got a few of those. I think they're in a good spot right now.
We have a few more minutes. What else did you want to touch on before we let you go?
Oh man, I appreciate you guys letting me get into this all. So thank you.
Well, let's hear. We have a lot of, obviously this, the audience for this show is probably 99% Western New Yorkers. Your thoughts on the Bills as they look down the home stretch, 5 more games. What's your assessment of where the Bills are and what we can expect in January?
I think we can all agree here that Josh Allen is a lot better than he was last year, just like he was a lot better last year than he was the year before that. But I mean, we can talk about the defense. We can talk about the receivers and the coaches and their opponent. It comes down to him. I mean, I think you saw some of the old Josh Allen resurface yesterday with some of the mistakes he made in the fourth quarter. If they really want to compete for Super Bowls, I thought Doug Whaley kind of put it well. Like, is your goal to be in the conversation? They're in the conversation. They'll probably win the division. First time since 95. That's awesome. If your goal is to win the Super Bowl, can he just make that switch mentally, as Kurt Warner kind of broke down? Can he anticipate? Can he process? I really agree with Kurt Warner. I never really saw the game that way, but like, you can't really just play make your way to 3-4 playoff wins in a row. Defenses are going to force him to react and force him to mentally process in a way he hasn't shown he can consistently do yet. So it's all about Josh Allen. And I know some folks like to play that counterfactual game. Some folks don't, but hey, you're in the Patrick Mahomes era. So like it or not, a quarterback that your owner loved, a quarterback you should have drafted, as bad of a situation as it would have been with Dennis and Culley and Kelvin Benjamin, all that, you could have had him. So I can't get that out of my head. I'm sure a lot of fans can't get that out of their head.
Hey, one last quick one, because I made a mention of this to Matt yesterday in a text. I want to see what you guys think of it, and I would hate to have this discussion without you involved, Tyler. This is a total observation, and it's something that comes from 25, 30 years of being a sports writer. It doesn't come from any kind of inside knowledge. It's just something that I noticed, and it's the type of thing that some people might, some people not. I don't know. Yesterday during the game, I saw something that I've seen from Josh Allen in many previous games, and it always seems to precede disaster, whether it be in a play or a sequence. There was a point in the game in the third quarter, I think it was, Matt, when I sent a text to say, Josh Allen is laughing. He's on the field, he's playing quarterback, and he just made some kind of play, or the Bills just made some kind of play. They're coming back into the huddle, and he's laughing. Now, again, read between the lines. This isn't me trying to this is just an observation. Whenever I see him start laughing on the field, he's about to make a major mistake. And he almost threw an interception right there at the goal line about 2 plays after I sent Matt that text. And then the fourth quarter happened.
Well, he ran a touchdown and got the unsportsmanlike conduct penalty.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I get that wasn't quite stupid, but a little overzealous.
Yeah, it was starting to
Weak call.
the brain is starting to drift a little bit and thinking, isn't this easy and fun? And whether it's a golfer or what have you, you start getting like, come on, guy. I mean, how much fun is this? Look, we're just boat racing
Look
these
at
guys.
us.
And then bang, bang, bang. And it's like, holy shit, what just happened? And I've seen it happen, I don't know, 6 times, 8 times. And he did it earlier in the year against the Jets and ended up throwing the interception that got the Jets back in the game in the season. He does it over and over again where anyways, I'll leave that on the floor. I know you got to get going, but has anybody else noticed this?
I have not noticed it at all, but that is why you're Tim Graham right there. I got to keep an eye out for that.
I might be full of
it is
shit.
true. I think we all kind of have our idiosyncrasies, whether he knows he's doing it or not, like there's something to that. But I'm sorry. I got to run, unfortunately, guys. You guys keep talking, please. I gotta go.
Sorry to hold you beyond your curfew here, Ty.
No,
But
you're good.
Good luck with
Call me a
go
few
along with
times.
Tyler Dunne.
Email me later.
What's that?
I'll be waiting for the emails in my inbox.
No, hey, you guys are amazing. Thank you for all subscribing and thanks for the support. This was awesome. So let's get some beers soon. They're long overdue.
You got it, bud. Thanks
All
for
right.
coming on.
Thank you.
Tyler Dunne of Go Along with Tyler Dunne. So yeah,
Done.
Yeah, now he's done. He's totally done.
Well, what's
anyways,
interesting
anything
about
left over to say about Josh Allen's maybe attitude, not attitude, but maybe mindset getting starting to drift during games sometimes?
I think what's interesting about it is if you think about the reverse, perhaps his best game as a pro was the day after his grandmother passed, and he was just locked in. Kind of a no prisoners type of approach, put his, foot on the jugular of that Seahawks defense and just kept going and going. And it was, there's a balancing act there, what you're saying, of playing loose, having fun, laughing it up, smiling, getting involved in the trash talk. He almost seemed like a different level focused in that Seahawks game, which a little bit odd considering, maybe not what people would expect. You either go one way or the other when you're dealing with something like that. But
he was that way against the Cardinals too. And I'm not saying feeling, the loss of his grandmother, but you'd see the sideline shots. It is no expression. Maybe somebody come by and tap him on the shoulder pads and you just give him a nod. The look on his face, even after Kyler Murray completed that pass, was, stone faced. It's just kind of like no expression, which is what you want out of your quarterback. You always hear that that's one of the great traits to have is you can't tell when he's winning or losing because he lets it go or whatever. But
Tom Brady doesn't have that, does he?
No, he does not.
He's sort of the exception. He's a complete lunatic.
Although you can't tell when he's winning. You can tell when he's losing.
Exactly.
But you can't. Sometimes he looks pissed off when he's winning.
It's like Russell Wilson's the opposite. He's always just happy-go-lucky no matter what's happening, and he's firing the guys up. So everybody's got kind of their own thing that works for them, that helps them find that, equilibrium that they play their best at. And you might be onto something with Josh Allen. We'll have to monitor that a little closely, because I do think I think we've touched on this show. I forget where I say certain things or write certain things, but the lack of crowds, I think, has helped Josh Allen not get too amped up, not get too excited, and too, not feel himself too much at times. It's not that he gets nervous. I don't think he's the nervous type, the guy that's rattled. I think he gets overexcited, overeager, perhaps a different kind of nervous, but he's not like scared to perform in front of a crowd. He just loves it too much. He gets way too fired up. So I don't know. Maybe it's all birds of the same feather.
One thing I would add, and I don't know if this means a whole lot in the question of, what do they need from Josh Allen to win a playoff game, win a Super Bowl, but I do think his personality and the way he carries himself and being kind of one of the guys really resonates with the rest of the Bills team. And I think to this point, that has helped Josh Allen. Maybe he needs to balance that as he matures. But I think if he was more of a quiet, keep to himself quarterback, he might not be having quite as much success to this point with this team.
Excellent point, Jonah. You're right. You can't have him bottle it up, because then that takes away one of his strengths, that is the leadership aspect of it. Of, all right, everybody, let's go. Pied Piper, everybody followed me. Everybody just gets in line and be like, hell yeah, we love this guy. But yeah, at some point he needs to, at least within a game, from a series to series or a play to play basis. I guess that leadership probably is established through the week heading up to the game. And then with the occasional play here or there where I think what he tried to do on that fumble, by the way, when he lost the fumble in the fourth quarter, he was trying to reenact that that play on Thanksgiving.
Yep, same thing. Tried to pick it up.
Tries to, will his way to a first down, or like, yeah, I've done this before. And people have been showing it because it is Thanksgiving. That game was a year ago. But that is an excellent point, Jonah. I think that there is a fine line that he needs to walk.
Well, quarterbacks don't often come across as just one of the guys. Aaron Rodgers maybe is the best example of that. And Josh Allen's been able to do that. I think Jim Kelly did some of that, even though there were a lot of differences. But Jim Kelly being like a peer of the linebackers on that team, I think was a big part of their chemistry. And you're seeing some of that with Josh Allen now.
Yep, I would agree with that. And, I found it interesting, although not surprising, that I would say 100% of what I noticed on Twitter in response to Josh Allen's unsportsmanlike conduct penalty were Bills fans saying, give me that 10 times out of 10. I love it. Let's see more of it. And actually, taunting penalties or unsportsmanlike conduct penalties aren't necessarily that detrimental, especially with special teams being so limited. However, if you get into a playoff situation and he does that and the Colts end up with the ball on the 40 instead of the 25 on their ensuing possession, and all they need is a field goal to win it or to take the lead, that 15-yard penalty, you're not going to be too thrilled with it. And you could say, well, it's a stupid rule. And I agree with you. I think it is a stupid rule. Tyreek Hill does a backflip into the end zone and doesn't get a penalty. I don't think he did anyway. And, how is that not taunting? I get it. It's stupid. But you can be debating how stupid it is when the Bills are out of the playoffs and you're watching two other teams in the AFC Championship game. The fact is it's a rule, and you have to play by those rules. And I think that his willingness to flirt not only with penalties in that regard, but also I think it's flirting with disaster when he lets himself get a little too excited. And it'll be interesting to monitor as the pressure mounts here over the next month and a half. Jonah, I wanted to, before we wrap up here, let's talk about Jaret Patterson. 8 touchdowns, 409 yards. Lance Leipold and Jaret Patterson both said, I think, the right things regarding his removal from the game. He would have had 2 NCAA records, most rushing yards in a game, most touchdowns in a game, either rushing or total, had he stayed in the game and scored that last touchdown that Kevin Marks got. But I'm sure Lance Leipold is kicking himself over the last 72 hours because, let's face it, mid-major programs live off of publicity and showcasing your players at the rare moments that they do happen. And Jaret Patterson was the second story on SportsCenter Saturday night after the woman kicker for Vanderbilt. So if not for that bit of history being made and breaking down the gender barrier in college football, Jaret Patterson leads off SportsCenter on Saturday night. I don't know. I'll just kind of throw it out there. There's a lot of little nuance to get into with Jaret Patterson.
Well, I do agree with you. I think it was big, that kind of national perception, along with the win and getting closer to the top 25. A lot of more people are talking about Buffalo football outside of Western New York and MAC country than they were a week or two ago. And a lot of that has to do with the numbers that Jaret Patterson is putting up. And UB did set a record in that game for combined running backs for 2 running backs. Kevin Marks had 97 yards, so it's 506. I don't know, maybe there is another running back tandem that's gone over 500 yards, but nobody's ever had 506. So that's quite an accomplishment. I was a little surprised Patterson was in there on that last drive. I thought they were maybe going for 400 or the record, because just covering this team, watching them, he had already had 33 or 34 carries. I thought Kevin Marks who hadn't gotten quite as many touches as Patterson would be getting the work at the end. The game was a little bit out of reach, and they got to 409 and then pulled him out. Marks gets 19 yards and a touchdown on the next carry. That would have been the record. But I don't think that Jaret Patterson needs to actually hold the actual records rather than the second best running game, the first 400-yard game in however many years, and tying the touchdown record. I think that's good enough for the perception. Maybe if there's another opportunity to do it again, they keep him in and see how far he can go, just to see what happens if we give him 40 carries. Can he get 500 yards? I don't know if I've never seen a high school running back or anybody at any level even get 409. So it might be interesting to see what happens when we just feed the guys the ball over and over again. But also you got to think of in a short season that had a weird off season, I wouldn't want to give my best running back too many carries and wear him down at points in midseason when just for records. And I know Lance Leipold isn't the type that cares quite as much about that as he does about winning the game and getting off the field and going and starting to prepare for the next game. And that's what Jaret Patterson said after the game as well.
And the thing that we need to remember also, and we talked about it on Friday with Gerald Dixon on Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, that Kevin Marks has an NFL future too. And with this shortened season, I'm sure UB wants to get him on film so people can look at him, help his ability to make it to the next level. They need to make sure that, they can't just keep Jaret Patterson on the field for 60 minutes. And, they have other guys, other mouths to feed, so to speak.
Jonah, what can you say about the offensive line? Because I don't want to kind of what Tim's talking about. We talked to Gerald Dixon last week. Not that he didn't heap praise on Jaret Patterson, but mentioned some of his limitations, mentioned that Marks has that NFL future. So they clearly have two very good running backs. But what can you tell us about these offensive linemen, how they've built this line? Because clearly they've now been this dominant rushing team for 2 years in a row. It's been the identity of this team in so many ways. And these are good running backs, but they're not doing it all themselves. How did they build this line? Who's up there? Whose names do people need to know?
Well, the top name is left tackle Coyote Awasika, who is a senior, and I don't know if he'll get drafted, but he'll be a draft prospect type of player. He moved over from right tackle to left tackle, and that's maybe the most impressive thing about this line is how well they're playing and blocking with replacing 3 starters and moving a right tackle to a left tackle. So only one player is in the same position he was in last year, the center, Mike Nowitzki. And he's a Rochester kid in his redshirt sophomore year. He didn't even play offensive line in high school. He was a lacrosse player and a tight end, and UB turned him into a center when he came here. And the turnover they've had on the line and still being as dominant as they are is what really impresses me. I mean, over the last 8 games, going back to last season, they haven't allowed a sack. That's 140 pass attempts, I think, and they're averaging over 300 yards rushing between Patterson and Mark. So the offensive line deserves a ton of credit, especially if you watch how big some of these holes are on Patterson's runs. I mean, it's not just him. He goes out there and he said nothing but green grass, and he's going untouched on maybe half of these 8 touchdowns. And with the offensive line, I should maybe mention, they have a blocking tight end, Jake Malinich, who I think he has 1 catch this year and 1 catch last year, but he's out there. He starts every game. He's blocking it up. Another tight end, Zach Lefebvre. It all works together. They got a quarterback who I think they've been running the ball better since they went to Kyle Van Treese at quarterback, and I think that has something to do with the way he commands the huddle and makes calls at the line. And they just got it really rolling. It sounds like a cliche, but it's very complimentary football. Everybody doing their job makes Jaret Patterson look as good as he has.
Tim Graham and Friends is brought to you by Shampoo Travis, Besaw and Kirshner, CPAs and business consultants. CTBK is a leading accounting firm with a growing team of accountants and business consultants with roots in Amherst, New York. And CTBK pairs every project with a focus on a human connection between its team and the client. For assurance, accounting, taxes, litigation support, and advice on mergers and acquisitions, CTBK is available and ready to solve any issue your business faces. For a consultation or to request a quote, call 716-630-2400. Again, that's 716-630-2400. CTBK, over a quarter century of proven accounting and business excellence for Western New York and beyond. University at Buffalo plays at Ohio on Thursday. The Bills playing San Francisco at somewhere Do we know that for sure yet? I mean, they're talking Glendale, Arizona, but I don't think that's been finalized, has it?
Not as of when we started recording, but I guess Arizona and maybe Dallas was in the mix, was being floated, but seems like Arizona is the most likely landing spot, but just the latest weird twist in a weird season.
Both Buffalo teams favored. UB is a 10-point favorite in Athens. And
They haven't won there in 12 years.
What's that?
UB hasn't won in Athens since 2008. A couple years ago, they were 9-1 and almost in the top 25, and they lost at Ohio, and it didn't ruin their season, but kind of took a little bit of shine off how good they were that year.
Ohio's one of those teams. They're always a
Frank
very good
Solich.
Mid-American Conference opponent. They are the type of team that occasionally knocks off a Big Ten team or whatever major opponent they have on their non-conference schedule.
Lance Leipold has said he's tried to build this Buffalo program in the image of what Frank Solich has done at Ohio. Lance Leipold worked for Frank Solich at Nebraska, and he probably, when he took the job, talked to Frank about, what it takes to win at this level, and he's doing that. But I think, especially in Lance Leipold's mind, getting this win at Ohio, the one place they haven't won yet, I think would really be as much as the championship is the crowning achievement for this program. I think surpassing Ohio and getting this win would really be that crowning achievement for Lance Leipold as a coach.
It seems as though there is a wrinkle that can keep UB focused for most opponents on this schedule. Like you say, Kent State, they were supposed to beat Kent State, but all they had to do is look back to last year, the last team that beat them, highest scoring team in the country. So UB still has something to prove, even though it's a team they're supposed to beat. Same thing with Ohio, to say we haven't won there in 12 years, and the link that Solich and Leipold have. Those types of things, I think, are very significant to keeping players and coaches focused and not taking an opponent for granted when you're starting to get national attention like UB has. It's
a revenge tour is what Coyote Awasika called it. They played all of the teams that they lost to last year. Ohio will be the last one, and even Northern Illinois in the MAC championship game a couple of years back. So if they get this Ohio win, they've beaten all the teams that have beaten them in the last couple of years and atoned for their losses.
This would get them to 5-0 if they were to win this game. And then what the finale is against
Akron.
Okay.
Which is
Akron's
a lower MAC team. I mean, they're going to win that game.
Lousy. Yeah. Akron's lousy. And then you have the MAC championship game and hopefully if you're UB, a bowl game.
Yeah. I think it hinges on this game. If they win this game, they win the MAC East, then they're going to be in the MAC championship. And I think it's a weird thing with the bowls because I don't think all of the tie-ins are going to play out the way they normally do. I don't think the MAC's going to get shut out of bowl games, but they might not get quite as many as they would in a normal season. I do think the two teams that go to the championship game probably can count on going to a bowl game, but it might not be more than that. So if UB does lose at Ohio on Saturday, they don't win the division, they don't go to the MAC championship game probably, and they might not get to a bowl game. So this is
Doesn't Jaret Patterson, though, give them a little bit of an insurance policy for that at large?
Well, possibly, but the rules are different. The rules about being bowl eligible, the rules about which schools from different conferences that might not be followed. Some of these bowl games are getting canceled. There's less bowl slots. I do think that probably helps UB's case maybe if the MAC is trying to get a third team in a bowl game. But I think that it's just not something that a team that doesn't win one of the divisions can really count on because they're not sure how many slots the MAC is really going to be able to fill. And the MAC and ESPN kind of decide these things, and I think they're probably going to go with the two teams that are in the championship game before they start looking for a third team.
Yeah, it'll be so that adds a little bit more pressure to UB. Good pressure, I think, to make sure that they take care of business and don't look too far ahead or take things for granted, or as Josh Allen might do, start laughing on the field.
I mean, UB hit the over by themselves on Saturday, so they can laugh all they want. That's pretty good stuff. 67.5 was the the over/under we were talking about.
Against the
71
highest
for
scoring
UB.
team too. So you knew that, yeah, that total was ratcheted up and they still got it all by themselves.
So
Let's look at the
hopefully,
totals for Ohio. Bear with me.
With a missed field goal, usually. You know,
hopefully
57.
hopefully
It's only 57. So I like that over.
hopefully all the Fs out there got rich listening to TGAF.
They
last
should
week.
have. Joel Stanishevsky was on it too. So if you've listened to this show, you get some pretty lucrative analysis
How'd his picks do? He had
on your
He had
foosball.
Bills over. I
He did.
I
Yeah, he
wasn't
missed
with
the
him on
over.
that
He
one.
did
I
miss
wasn't
the
with him.
over. If the Chargers, which they should have after completing that Hail Mary, should have scored. If Anthony Lynn doesn't coach himself out of a touchdown, then it
The-
does. I think it pushes.
No, I
on the
think
over, right?
it depends. It would have been 27-24, which would have been 51. Still would have been under.
Oh, was it 54?
The spread was hanging in the balance, though.
It's the
Um,
spread. Yeah, the spread. It would have been. It would have pushed on the spread. That's right.
It would
which
have.
is why were the Bills playing such aggressive defense on that last 3-second play? I would think you just let them walk in. That game's over.
Well, maybe they had some money on the spread.
Yeah, there was 3 seconds left. There was no way for. There was no way. It was impossible for.
It's that season long
Chargers to tie the game.
They heard us knocking on their negative point differential a couple weeks ago. I want to make sure that they jack that number up.
The
Sean
Chargers
McDermott
would have
wants his
had to
against the spread record at post bye to look really good, so he had to hold it down.
Can you advance your own onside kick? I know that another team can, the opposing team can return it. Can you advance? Is there the possibility of taking your own onside kick for a touchdown? Because that's what they would have had to do to win.
That's a good question. I don't know the answer.
Because the
Not-
touchdown would have taken 2 seconds. That leaves
I know
1
I've done
second.
it on Madden, but I don't know if what the rule is now. I kind of
Wouldn't a guy on the other team have to touch it? Because you can
If it
advance.
go,
a
no, the
ball.
whole 10-yard thing. So if it goes 10, if you can get it to go 10 yards, can you grab it and keep going? I think it might be. I think
I
it's
think it's a
there
live ball.
at the recovery.
I don't know.
I think
have
it
to
might
look
be
that
one
one
of
up.
those deals you can advance.
Well, what
All right,
happened a couple of years ago when the Bills didn't field the kick with Anthony Lynn as coach? In that last game, and they kicked it down the field, and the other team, I think it was the Jets, ran down and just picked up the ball. Was a dead ball, or were they able to advance that?
A good question. All right. Well, I'll have to find this answer. If you're listening to Tim Graham and Friends brought to you by CTBK right now, I will make sure I get this question answered and post it on Twitter, or we will discuss on the other episode later this week.
I want Tyler Dunne to write 4,000 words about it and then email me by the end of the night.
And he probably will. Hey,
We're his
we're gonna-
boss.
We're going to have some boxing talk on Tim Graham and Friends brought to you by CTBK later this week. William Detloff, who I used to write with at Ring Magazine and KO, who has another interesting journalism story similar to Tyler Dunne. William Detloff has a publication called Ringside Seat. Although it is a physical publication, boxing essays and some coverage. It's all feature stories. But we are going to talk boxing later this week with William Detloff. And I actually reached out to him last week and said, I want to have you on. Do we want to talk about Mike Tyson, Roy Jones fight, or would that be belittling boxing? Would you rather do it another time? And it was his choice. He said, let's not talk before Tyson Jones. So that way we actually talk about meaningful boxing.
But does he want to talk about Jake Paul and Nate Robinson?
Such as it is. Yeah, Jake Paul and Nate. Poor Nate. The guy, I mean, how can he lose that fight? Number one. And then he will just, he was an instant meme. People were reenacting it.
Well, that's
did either of you guys buy the pay-per-view? No, nor did I. But I had some friends who had it, and they were giving me some updates. From what I understand, the Tyson Jones fight was not an embarrassment. It was somewhat competitive. Mike Tyson, I did see some highlights. Mike Tyson did seem to sting him a couple of times, but Roy Jones was one of the most boring fighters to me. For me, I mean, a lot of people loved him, but I thought he was just boring as hell when he was in his prime. And he was able to tie up Tyson a couple of times, and it ended up in a draw for those who didn't see. So you think of Tyson Jones, two guys over 50, washed up in an exhibition. This doesn't even count towards their records. And it ends in a draw. You would think, what a mess. But a lot of people I talked to said it was actually pretty entertaining.
Well, can I say this real quick? Because I don't think you're old enough to remember, but I know you've written about Muhammad Ali extensively, probably could answer this question. When he was fighting Lyle Alzado and Gorilla Monsoon and all these exhibitions late in his career, what was that taken seriously, or was that a joke? Like, this fight was kind of looked at, because we haven't seen that kind of retired boxer doing those kind of fights lately. It seemed like a big thing years ago.
Yeah, I think somewhere in the middle of taken seriously and a total joke. The Lyle Alzado fight had a massive crowd. I want to say they fought in Denver. I don't remember.
Makes sense.
Where
He
they
was
fought.
on the Broncos then, Alzado.
Yeah, they fought in a stadium and it had a huge crowd. The Gorilla Monsoon, when Tyson went over, or Ali went over to Japan and fought their pro wrestling deity, whoever that was at the time. They were massive events, but he never was going to apply himself. He was there to put on a show. And if he ever thought he was losing the crowd, he would do the Ali shuffle, land a few punches, and dance out of trouble. So it was more like going to see a concert. I got to see Muhammad Ali more so than any kind of legitimate sporting competition. But it was also different back then. I think people still believed wrestling was real, or at least there were a lot of people who bought into it. It wasn't totally out of the shadows. And so people did go into some of these exhibitions thinking there was a chance Ali could lose, Ali could get seriously hurt. It was kind of the inspiration for some of the discussions that led to UFC. Can a wrestler beat a boxer? Can a karate champion beat a sumo wrestler? Let's get all these guys in the ring and find out. And so there was part of that. It was, but I think mostly it was, it was tongue in cheek because you knew Ali was going to have to fight a boxer at some point, and those were the fights you really wanted to pay attention to. But a great question that I think you'd have to probably live during that time and have witnessed it to know what it really felt like. And that does predate me. All right. Anything else we want to touch on before we wrap it up? No? All right. Well, thanks, guys. Good talk. We talked foosball. We talked journalism. We talked with Tyler Dunne of Go Long with Tyler Dunne. And folks should give it a look. Consider subscribing if you are a fan of long-form journalism and original reporting. All right, we'll talk later this week. We'll talk Bills 49ers, probably UB at Ohio recap, and boxing on the next Tim Graham Show, brought to you by CTBK.